Good. These are the important sorts of situations we like to cover in school sauce. These are the important sorts of... These are the... Hello, saucers. On today's episode of School of Sauce, Irish whiskey. In the world of whiskey, Irish whiskey was a first. When Irish monks traveled to the Middle East and Mediterranean, they brought back distillation technology originally used to make perfumes. The Irish, being the Irish, adapted this technology to make alcohol. Monks at this time were the main source of healing and medicine in the world, and they used alcohol as a solvent for remedies and other medicines. Early distillers of medicines and elixirs, including alchemists and monks, called the liquid that resulted from the distillation a spirit, that is to say, the essence of the initial liquid. Obviously, that's where we get the term from, better than calling it ghost juice or whatever. As whiskey became more well established in Ireland, it gained popularity with the nobility as an alcoholic beverage. Since only monks really had the capacity to produce it, it wasn't available in quantity sufficient to make it affordable for the average peasant. Whiskey, as a recreational drink, remained a drink for fancy-pants people for a long time.
It's actually recreational, not recreational.
You know what? I'll pronounce whatever the fuck I want. Whiskey, as a recreational drink... Fuck you, Mike. That's how I Whiskey, as a recreational drink, remained a drink for the fancy-pants people for a long time. When the Tudors conquered Ireland in the 16th century, this all changed. While establishing their foothold on the Emerald Isle, the English dissolved the monasteries and began to establish regulations on whiskey production, allowing for distilleries on a license-based system. This actually resulted in an expansion of the production of whiskey, which in turn led to whiskey being more readily available and ensuring its popularity. Irish whiskey was, for a long time, the most popular spirit in the world. Unfortunately, factors including American Prohibition, the First World War, and the rise of popularity of Scotch whiskey led to a long period of decline. Fortunately for the world, though, Irish whiskey has been making a comeback lately, and you have us to give you a heads up on some of the difference between types. Well, sort of. See, the Irish are fairly chill about what counts as Irish whiskey. You can't just, slap a leprechaun on a bottle of tinted vodka and call it a day, but there also aren't as many regulations as there are in other sorts of whiskeys. For example, in anticipation of the Scotch and Bourbon episodes, we've actually had to hire lawyers to cut through all the regulations and crap. True story, bro. Anyway, the Irish Whiskey Act of 1980, which is really a recodification of the Irish Whiskey of 1950, obviously, states the following requirements for whiskey. The whiskey has to be distilled in Ireland or Northern Ireland. Duh. The distillation must at all points be lower than 94.8% alcohol by volume and made in such a way as to derive its flavor and aroma from the materials and methods used, and it must include malt diastase, an enzyme that breaks down starches into sugars. It must also include a yeast-based fermentation. The whiskey has to be aged in wooden casks for a total of at least 3 years in Northern Ireland or Ireland combined. So, if a barrel was to age in Northern Ireland for 2.5 years, and then an earthquake happens and the barrel rolls into Ireland and it's found 6 months later, you're good. But if the earthquake rolls the barrel into the ocean and it goes into international waters for a month before washing ashore in Ireland, you'd have to wait 6 months before calling it Irish whiskey. These are the important sorts of situations we like to cover in school sauce. If the final product contains a blend of 2 or more distillates, it must be labeled blended Irish whiskey. Unblended Irish whiskey is normally triple distilled in pot stills, which tends to result in a more flavorful distillation. If the distillate comes from only malted barley, then this is referred to as single malt whiskey. Malted barley, by the way, is barley that's been soaked in water to begin germinating it so it develops the enzymes necessary to turn the grain starch into sugar, which can then be turned into alcohol! By the yeast, whatever, fuck you, yeast. The difference between single malt Irish whiskey and Scotch whiskey is that, in order to stop the germination, the Irish use a closed drying method instead of an open drying method. They also don't use any peat in the fuel to get the flames going. Because of these two differences, the resulting whiskey isn't as smoky as Scotch. If it's made from a mixture of malted and unmalted whiskey, it's simply called single pot still whiskey. Irish whiskey, distilled in a column still from various grains, is called grain whiskey. This is normally a lighter, more neutral whiskey and rarely sold on its own. More often than not, it's blended with other whiskeys to make blended Irish whiskey. How to drink it. On the rocks. Icing it mellows the drink down a bit. And it makes it... Yeah, we don't want the fire engine in the back. God damn it, why do you have to burn your house down? Neat leaves it as blended by the distiller without further distillation. Nice and simple. With a splash of clean, preferably distilled or purified water. This is supposed to release some of the flavor and odor that the alcohol in the drink tends to hold onto. Remember, alcohol is a great solvent, especially for flavors. You can also try some cocktails, which we'll give some examples of in other videos. And that's all for today's lesson. If you like these videos, please make sure to subscribe and tell your friends about them. If there are any suggestions you have for us, please feel free to comment below. Remember, don't drink to get drunk. Drink because it tastes good. Always drink responsibly. We'll see you at the next lesson. Sláinte. You saucy no.
You look so f***ing creepy.
It's probably the lights and the noom and the...
I think it's mostly your face.
You know what? Fuck you.